Welcome back again. My name is Douglas Grummins. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to continue the book 10,000 Waves and Chapter 4. And I'd like to dedicate this Chapter 4 to my father. This is one of the last stories I told my father before he passed away. But anyway, here we go with Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is entitled Golden California. I had never surfed on the West Coast before, so I was itching to go. One day I saw an ad in the Aikido Journal for a seminar near Los Angeles, and I approached my instructor, Ty, about it and asked him if I could go to the seminar. And Ty said, "You don't really learn a lot at those seminars." And then Ty told me about a 6-dan Aikido instructor friend of his who was having a 3-day seminar up in Oakland. I went home and asked my wife if I could go to the seminar, and she said yes, and now I had a dual reason to go to visit California. I was so excited. All the waves I had only seen in magazines, I would now be able to have a chance to ride. I bought a map of California, laid it out, and planned my trip. My plan was to fly into Los Angeles, rent a car, and drive up the Pacific Coast Highway and make my way over to Oakland, where the seminar was. The next month flew by, and before I knew it, I was packing for my trip. I brought 2 boards with me on that trip. With me on that trip. One was my 6-foot Tim Bissell shortboard, and the other was my 8-foot-long Mike Eaton Boneser. It was late April of 1998, and I remember flying to L.A. From my window. I could see mountaintops covered with snow. I did not bring any snow gear this trip. This was all about surfing and Aikido. I did wonder if there were any ski resorts on those mountains, though. And when the airplane landed, I collected my boards. A little confused, I kept asking random people for the location of where the rental car shuttle bus would pick you up. And one little Japanese guy said, "Over there on the other side of the airport." I had a longboard skateboard, and I used bungee cords to wrap my boards together. Suitcase in hand and wheeling all my boards all the way across the airport, I found the shuttle bus. I think the joke was on me, though, because as the shuttle bus made several stops all the way around the airport and returned to where I very started, I was kind of confused. I picked up my rental car and headed directly to the closest beach I could find, was Santa Monica. I checked into a hotel right next to the beach, and I thought it was strange that the hotel had no air conditioning. I had never been to a hotel that did not have an air conditioner. I grabbed my shortboard and jetted to the beach. The water looked exactly the same yucky brown color as Galveston's water did that day, and there were some waves, but this was not what I had dreamt about. So after the night's stay, I loaded up the car and started heading north. My first stop was Malibu, and what a beautiful town. It had some really cool art galleries and winding, luscious hills. I found a nice little hotel just north of town, and I drove down to the Malibu beach, and there it was, a perfect right-hand wave. I was only 3 foot at best, but long and very crowded. So I sat on the beach watching, wondering how I was ever going to snag one of those waves. And I didn't have a real longboard with me, and the lineup was thick with longboarders. I pulled out some potato chips and immediately fed the gulls that came soaring in for a meal. And as I started sharing my chips with the gulls, I started to notice the similarities between these gulls and the surfers in the lineup. It's not always the biggest or the fastest bird that got the most chips. I started noticing some of the smaller birds getting more chips due to their positioning and patience. This was a message from existence to tell me about scoring waves in the lineup. I took several pictures of fellows on longboards at Malibu and then decided to drive up the coast a little further and check out a different spot. Perhaps I'd find something a little bit bigger and a little friendlier for shortboarders. I drove up the coast to the next spot and noticed a restaurant. I remember seeing the restaurant in the movie Point Break. It's called Neptune's Net. I pulled up along the coast parking areas, and the surf looked a lot bigger. Long, 4-foot tall walls, beautiful water. I broke out my Bissell, and even though the right was pumping, it was really crowded, so I opted to surf with this young little fellow a little closer to the shore. We were both scoring beautiful 3-foot barrels all morning long. What amazed me the most about that day was after was after I ate lunch at Neptune's Net, I sat and watched this fellow on a boogie board. This guy was out there with all these longboarders, and usually the longboarders catch the waves long before anybody else. They can take off on a wave that's not even breaking yet and be standing long before you would even have a chance to get started paddling. This fellow on the boogie board was catching these waves before the longboarders, and then he would stand up and ride his boogie board sponge like a surfboard. He beat a longboarder up on a wave, and I watched the longboarder flip him off. I liked this spot so much that I drove back to Malibu and stayed one more night there, and came back and rode the next day. I surfed the whole next day at the same spot, and then loaded up the car and continued driving up the PCH, that's Pacific Coast Highway. I had never seen such beautiful coastline. The road wound through the cliff lines. Every chance I got, I looked down to the Pacific Ocean, catching a glimpse of beautiful breaks and waves, peeling across reefs, totally unridden. Unknown to me, the Pacific Coast Highway often has rock slides, and they close the road up near Big Sur. I had to detour and find another way up to Oakland, other than the PCH. So I left the coastline and made my way up through the wine country. And this is when I started having visions. I pulled into a fast food restaurant, ate my lunch, and then closed my eyes when I went out to the van. And I started having flashes of places I had never seen before. After resting for a few minutes, I needed to get back behind the wheel. I had an Aikido seminar to get to. I drove up through San Jose and into Oakland, and the dojo was not hard to find. I made it in time for the first night's lesson. The sensei's name was Rick, and on the exterior he reminded me of my father. On the inside he was quite different, though. When I met him, I gave him an ironwood sculpture that I picked up back in Malibu. But I couldn't put my finger on it, but there seemed to be something special about this man. There was something different, something about him. He was an exceptional Aikido instructor, but that wasn't it. He had a soft, meditative feel about him. We practiced Thursday night, and one of his students put me up for the night at his place. While I was at the student's house, I laid down to sleep on his couch, and as soon as I closed my eyes, the visions started again. They were only a few seconds long and very vivid, but then out of the blue, a voice inside of me said, "You have got to go to Santa Cruz." My plan was to stay and attend the rest of the seminar in Oakland. I attended the Friday morning class and then told Sensei Rick that I didn't know what it is, but I'm being called to Santa Cruz. He was so understanding and not upset at all. He told me his son liked to go down there too to surf also. So Friday after lunch, I packed up the car and drove to Santa Cruz. As I was driving, I started seeing the buildings that were in my visions. I felt this eerie feeling that I could not explain. When I pulled up to the beach in Santa Cruz, I started looking for a place to stay. The place was so beautiful, with cliffs lining the beaches and this long pier with shops up and down it. My timing was perfect. The first few days there, the waves were everywhere. They were breaking near the pier. They were breaking right on the beach. There was also a really nice wave breaking out a couple 100 feet away from the shoreline. As I looked back from the pier towards the waterline, I noticed there was a nice hotel right on the beach, but it was there were cliffs that the hotel was up on, but it was facing the beach, and it had 4 or 5 really tall trees. And jumping out of the text a little bit, those trees last time I visited Santa Cruz are gone. The cliffs had receded back. I think either a storm or something had taken out the trees, but it was majestic back then when those trees were there. Anyway, back to the text. I made my way up to this beautiful hotel and asked if they had a room that wasn't too expensive. Luckily, they did, so I checked in and unloaded the car. The first wave I rode was the one that was right in front of the hotel, a couple 100 feet offshore. It was a longboard wave, so it was time for me to ride the Eaton Boneser. This was the first time I had pulled it out of its for this whole trip. These waves are so clean and beautiful. I was sitting in the lineup when this little sea lion popped up next to me. He startled me a little, as I'd never seen a sea lion in the water before. And as I sat there in the lineup, I noticed these beautiful right-hand peelers coming in all along the cliff line over towards Steamer Lane. Of course, I didn't know what was Steamer Lane was at the time, but I'd seen it in magazines, but seeing it in real, and from a distance, was quite different. I had never surfed here before, so looking off the cliff line, I started to paddle over to that direction. It was a long paddle. As I started noticing, people were pointing at me and laughing. I paddled for what seemed like a mile and made it to the first right-hand wave that came my way. I turned around and caught a beautiful 5-footer wave. That's when I noticed that there were concrete stairs lining almost every cliff break. So the joke was on me. I just paddled a mile, and I could have walked and saved my arms and climbed down the stairs. I surfed all day long, big 5 to 7 foot waves. These waves are really barreling, powerful waves, and I'm a regular footer, so I was in heaven. When this big wave came right at me, I started to take off and I wiped out. The wave pulverized me. I was held down in the dark for so long that I ran out of air and energy, and I had nothing left. I started saying to myself, this is it. I'm done. I have nothing left. So I went limp. I let go and I prayed. I said, thank you for everything. And it was funny. I felt no fear of death. I just accepted it. Then as I closed my eyes, there was this golden light, and I felt this arm pull me from my collar up to the surface. And when I surfaced, I looked around to thank somebody for saving me, but there was nobody there. I was completely alone. This was not my time to die. And breaking out of the text a little bit, it is, kind of silly, drowning, in 6 to 7 foot surf. I mean, I guess it could happen, but it's very, very highly unlikely. But I wasn't used to those waves back then. Anyway, back to the text. I was a little frazzled. I took a break from surfing. I went out to see the rest of the town. And this is a real surf city town. It has a surf museum, waves everywhere, and a beautiful beach coastline. After dinner, I paddled back out to enjoy some beach breaks. I rode this one wave right up onto the sand and walked right off the nose of the board right up onto the beach, like I owned the place, just like I was a pro or something. There were college girls up in their hotel balconies hooting and hollering at me, asking me to come up and join them and everything. And I was like, man, this really is a surfer's heaven. Sunday morning came, and I was back in the water. And this was my last full day of vacation, so I woke up to this beautiful 6-foot surf. I stayed in the water all morning long and went back to the hotel and ate lunch. And it was a beautiful, warm, sunny day, and I felt like lying down on the hotel's lawn chairs, facing the cliff line and the beach. I kicked back the headrest on the recliner, so I was like halfway back, but not fully upright. I laid back in the recliner and I said a prayer to God. And in my prayer, I said to God, I will never be this young again. I will never be able to surf this well again, and I don't want any future, and I don't care about any past. As far as I'm concerned, you can take me right now. And then I went into meditation with that feeling. No postures, no effort, and for the first time in my life, I was totally relaxed. At that moment, my third eye opened up. My eyes were still closed, but I could see all around me. And then something amazing happened. Starting from the ocean's horizon, the sky started turning bright golden yellow. The sky became like gold. All this golden light grew and it covered the whole sky, and it kept coming towards me. This yellow light was filling the land. I could see the trees and the grass glow with this yellow light. It was enveloping everything and coming closer and closer to me. And then the golden light reached me. And when it reached me, it entered my skin. And when it entered my skin, the light also started to feel like energy. And it had the consistency of honey. That's the only way I can just describe it. And that's the only way, that it was. The honey was kind of like pure love, the purest love. I don't know if it happened, but I felt like I was levitated a couple feet above the chair. The honey light was filling every cell in my body, full of light and full of love. And I could feel every cell full of love and honey. I don't know how long I was in this meditation, but when I came out of it, I was glowing. I looked at my hands and at my feet, and I could see this light pouring out of me. And then the realization started happening. The first realization was that I was still here on Earth, but it wasn't the same Earth that I used to see. Now the trees glowed, the sky glowed. I could see this light in everything. What I realized was that I was being welcomed back into the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was not some far off hidden paradise. It was right in front of me the whole time. I could just not see it. Everything was glowing with God's radiance. The second realization that I had was that I was no longer separate from existence. There was no more I. Whatever I was no longer there. I was no longer being separate from existence at all. The third realization was that the ocean did not stop at the water surface. It was also the air I breathed. The ocean went up a couple thousand feet above us and above the water surface. We are still in the ocean, only the water is a little thinner. Every single moment, more truths were opening up before me. The way I like to describe it is that I came home, I died in that chair, and now I was born brand new. I also no longer lived in time. I know that's hard to imagine or comprehend, but now in every moment since then, I exist 100% in the present moment. I no longer felt the pull of or the stress of time. After my meditation that day, I walked into the hotel's lobby, and the young lady at the counter was staring at me with this look of amazement on her face. I asked her politely, I was like, "What?" She just smiled and said, "You're glowing." And I'm like, "Oh boy." Anyway, my vacation was over and it was time to head back to Houston. And flying back to Houston was hard. I had found heaven, and I did not want to leave California. As soon as I came home, I was eager to get back to the dojo to see my friends. And as we put on our uniforms, I started noticing the same glow that surrounded me was also coming from a couple senior students in the school. I walked up to them and I said, "Why, I never knew how bright you were."